If you're in a sad girl mood and wanting to read sad books, then you are in the right place because I'm going to be sharing over 20 sad books that I know that you guys are going to absolutely eat up. If you're in a space where you want to read like cozy romances or deep heartfelt books that make you cry, you're gonna love all of these. I have a stack of books that I have read, and then I also have a stack of books that I want to read. So let's get into all the sad books. I hope we don't end up all just like crying by the end of this video. We are gonna start out with romances, and I have 6 romances that are great if you want to just have a good cry and feel all the emotional feels. The first book I'm gonna share is one I actually don't physically have on me, and it's called Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. One of my friends is actually borrowing it right now. That book literally had me sobbing. I'm not even kidding. And it is rare for me to like absolutely sob in a book, but that book literally had me on the floor. It's about a couple who they were married and then something ends up pulling them apart, and you end up finding out what that thing is later on into the book, and it is so heart-wrenching. But they start to kind of have feelings for each other, and as those feelings start to grow, they're like, should we try this again? We own a business together. We have kids together. We're already co-parenting, like things are going well. Should we dip our toe back into this relationship that didn't work to begin with? And it's just such a real story, and I feel like Kennedy Ryan does a great job of making all the characters really, but specifically the main male character and female character kind of be the hero and the villain of the story. Like they're very human, and I love books like that. Another book that'll make you cry is Fast by Millie Belazar. This book I'm pretty sure only has 3,000 reviews on Goodreads, and it needs more. It is about a girl who is like pretty much struggling most of her life, but you get her life from age 8 all the way through age 30, and her next door neighbor is like her best friend who she ends up falling in love with, and he's just like such a good support for her. Something happens that is just like such a tragic event, and they end up kind of like parting ways, and then they get reconnected as adults while she's trying to navigate her life and work through her trauma. It is just such a great book, and it shows how resilient some people can be as they work through their trauma, and how it can also affect your life if you don't work through that trauma. Another book that I love, which is actually the 5th book in a series, so I definitely would recommend it, but it's one of those you have to read other books first, is Into the Dark by Jessa Hastings. It's in the Magnolia Park series. Now this is the book that I own. It's like so beat up, and this is a book that actually I was able to get prior to the release of the actual book. So like the binding is different, the back is different. It's literally like just a book just barely put together. It's signed in the inside, and Brady actually was just the sweetest to get me this as a Christmas gift. I got this right after my dad passed, and it was such a beautiful gift because this book deals so heavily with grief, and I don't think I've ever read any book ever that deals with grief as well as this book does. You'll feel very, very seen if you're grieving anyone in your life that you love. I also own this book in just like the original copy because this is the only book I've ever rated like 6 stars. And I always was like, okay, like you really have to rate a book 6 stars. Like there's 5-star ratings for a reason. But this book transcends, absolutely transcends the 5-star scale. Like it literally goes above and beyond. One of you guys actually commented in one of my last videos that you have 5-star reads and then you have infinity stars, and I love that concept because this feels like infinity stars. Like it feels like it should have an unlimited amount of stars. I wanted to read it again before it was even finished. It is so sad. You can see the gold here, it's beautiful, and then the back is actually on this book, and so I had to pick up the just like actual cover, but they're both beautiful, beautiful books, and I definitely will be reading the series again before the newest book comes out in the series. Another romance book that will absolutely have you on the floor is Love You Always by Lauren Lacey. This book is beat up as well. I feel like the books where I cry or just get the most emotional are usually very beat up. Now, this book is messy. All the characters are messy. You get a couple that started dating when they're like, I don't know, I think early high school, and you get all of the immaturity of a couple that is dating in high school. Like he didn't text me back, like where's he at? I'm gonna go try to find him because like I don't trust him type of thing. Like you get all of that. But then you also see the couple grow and get older and mature. And then you also see them like kind of, something just pulls them apart, which I feel like is kind of a theme in a lot of the books that I am picking up. But I feel like it's so real and true to a lot of relationships where when you get older, you grow, something, if it doesn't pull you apart, something is like hard that you go through as a couple and you kind of have to work through. And this book in particular, they go through a really, really sad thing as a couple, and it really just is absolutely heartbreaking. I will say the writing of this story is definitely different than a lot of other books. It kind of takes some getting used to, because it's very like plain, but it is a very dramatic story and I really enjoy it, and it's one that doesn't have enough hype. I think it only has like maybe 1,000 reviews on Goodreads, and there's a whole series behind it. The second book I wasn't as obsessed with, but this book I rated 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I actually think I've rated every book that I've shared so far. I've rated 5 stars, 6 stars, 4.5 and above. I also read Broken Clocks by Daniel Allen. This is such a sad story. It's very short, so if you want like a short sad story, I feel like this is a good one. I love Daniel Allen's writing because it is really quick and to the point. This one, I don't want to say too much because I feel like I could easily spoil the back of it, or just spoil the story, so I like want to look through the back. But this book is all about, I think, a couple, well, not a couple, 2 people who've had feelings for each other, and every time they kind of get together, timing is always just off. And then at one point in the story, the timing seems to be right, but then maybe it isn't. So I'm gonna leave it at that because I don't want to like make this be a spoiler video. I want it to be spoiler free. And another book that is so sad is The Air He Breathes by Brittany Cherry. I actually have shared a lot of books by Black authors. This book's by a Black author. This book's by a Black author. Before I Let Go is by a Black author. This is by a Black author. So there's lots of books by Black authors in this stack as well. I try to read very like diversely, but I also have just like a mix of popular books and stuff in here too. But this book right here is so sad. It's about 2 couples who have lost important people in their lives. And honestly, the majority of the book, they trauma bond with one another, and you see them work through their grief through each other and with each other, and then they realize like, okay, that's not healthy. How can we like make this like a healthy thing that we're doing, but like still work through our grief? And it is very unique because I feel like if you have ever lost someone that you love, you don't always navigate grief in the best way, and you can really feel the emotions of these characters in this story. It's also one that you'll finish in like a day because it's very, very fast paced. And then I have another stack of books. These are all young adult books, and I love reading young adult books, especially for sad books, because I feel like there's so many things that young adults go through that like you just kind of feel like you don't have an outlet or someone to talk to. I really struggled in high school, and I feel like these books would have been perfect for me to read. This book right here, Point, is so sad. It's about a girl who is a ballerina, and she goes through something that is very traumatic, and you see her go through that thing, but then you also see her continue to go to her ballet classes and try to have friends and try to not have disordered eating, and it's just like, it is just a very sad story. I don't want to spoil too much in this book, but I remember reading this in high school and I was really, really captivated by it. This is again a book by a Black author. Now this is a very popular book, and the rest of these 2 books are very popular. The Way I Used to Be is a really sad story. I don't want to say too much about this, but this is told in 4 different parts from freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior year. It's about a girl who goes through something that is just so heartbreaking and sad, and I feel like I haven't said the word sad enough in this video, but she goes through something that's so heartbreaking and so sad, and she just like buries it down and just tries to push forward. This book also was one that had me just like barely holding it together, and I actually bought the second book that came out, but I have not been in a mental headspace to be able to read it yet because I know it's going to be sad. But this is a story of survival. In high school, there are things that people go through that I feel like they don't open up to people about, and it can be hard to navigate life with that. And so this is just a beautiful story of resilience. Another very sad book is A Thousand Void Kisses by Tillie Cole. Now, I did recently learn that the author of this book, allegedly, I can't say like for sure, but she has like a romance book where the main character, I'm pretty sure, is like black, and the main guy character is like in the KKK, and they like fall in love or something, which to me is weird for a white author to write about. Like, just very weird. Like, why? Like, I get people like taboo subjects, but like that is not the thing to romanticize. Like, very, very weird. So she wrote this book, and I initially wanted to read the second book in the series, and I think I bought it. I can't remember when I bought it, but I bought it and I just felt like kind of icky picking it up, because like just knowing that like this other book was one that she's written. Maybe she's changed or grown, or maybe she's seen the error in her ways. I don't know, but I always have to add that caveat before recommending this book, because if that's not something that bothers you, then, you know, by all means. But if you didn't know that, I feel like I would have wanted to know that before reading or buying this book. And this is obviously a totally different story, but same author, and it's about a couple and they fall in love, and then the girl, she ends up moving away, and when she ends up moving away, she pretty much ends up ghosting the guy that she was like in love with, and you don't really find out why until later in the book. And this was another book where I sobbed, like actually sobbed. I do think it's very cheesy, and you kind of have to read this book with music playing. There's, I think, a whole playlist in this book to like listen to all the songs that, yeah, they mention a lot of the songs, and there's a playlist to listen to them in this book. I don't think I would have cried nearly as hard, or maybe at all, if I hadn't been listening to the playlist that was on here, but I did. And so I had to share it. This is when I was actually crying on a plane while I was reading this. Another book where I was crying almost on a plane, wow, say that 5 times fast, is If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. This was a 5-star read for me. I know it won't be for everyone. That's okay. 5-star reads are for me. I always try to like tell people like why I love a book. But just because something's a 5-star read for me does not mean it will be for everyone. Like, I recommend books and I share books and love books, but every book that I love and share is not one that I will recommend, if that makes sense. And so I do recommend this to people, but I can see how some people wouldn't see this as a 5-star read. For me, I connected with it on a very deep level because the main character, Autumn and Finn, or main characters, Autumn and Finn, are best friends. They've lived next to each other for years, and then they get older, and Autumn, she kind of feels like Finn isn't just cool enough to be friends with anymore. And he's like in the popular crowd, but she's kind of in like the edgy crowd, and it's like cringy for her to be friends with someone like Finn. And so because of that, she kind of shuts down their friendship, and it reminded me so much of being in high school and feeling the pressure to be friends with certain types of people. But also something very tragic in this happens, and it also made me just realize that life is so short and you just never know what's gonna happen, and so you should never like live your life on the terms of other people and like what they want you to be or do. And it made me reflect a lot in this. But again, I feel like this won't be a 5-star read for everyone, and that is okay. Now we're gonna get into the books that are like contemporary fiction. I'm gonna share the first book, but take this as you will, because if you guys saw my video from, I want to say, a year ago when I read this book, I did not enjoy this book, and I know so many people did. It's called A Little Life. I didn't. Now, for me, I think my biggest qualm with this book is you read, what is this, 816 pages of pure sadness, which is fine. And let me not go on a rant about this book, because I did a whole hour-long video that's spoiler-free just on this book, and it took me like a month to 2 months to read. And the thing to me that I struggled with this book is that in so many books that are about like sadness, grief, whatever you're going through, I feel like there's always some kind of light at the end of the tunnel. And to me, that is realistic, and I like when an author does that, because I genuinely do not believe, and this is my own belief system, so I can't say that it's for everyone, but I don't believe that anyone has a life without hope. And that's just my personal belief. I think that there is beauty in every corner of every single person's life, whether they choose to see it or not. And Jude, the main character in this book, he goes through a lot of hardships, like a lot of hardships that are very detailed, very detailed. So again, go into this at your own risk. But every moment of joy that he has throughout his entire life is stripped away, and the author does not give any semblance of joy. And even the ending of this, I was like, are you serious? Like, and I know that every person's life does not end on a good note, but I do think that every person's life has sprinkles of joy within it. And every sprinkle of joy that he got was stripped away so fast, and it literally was giving me whiplash. And I also feel like there's a main character in this who you are supposed to love, but I feel like I struggled with this main character and loving this main character because they were not like really respecting the boundaries of Jude. And I don't know, I know so many people love this character and they're just like, oh my God, this character is perfect, da 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 da. And to me, I was like, are we really going to like put this person on a pedestal when they're not respecting Jude's boundaries or don't really seem to care about the boundaries? And I also really struggle with the author who, now this is another thing. People want to talk about authors all day long. Y'all want to come for so many authors. I mean, this author, people love this book. But this author has been very vocal about how they do not believe in therapy. And all these characters need therapy, every single one of them. And they didn't really highlight that at all. And with Jude, the main character, going through so much trauma and not going to therapy, this is like such an honest look at someone who is going through life without like working through their trauma. But I feel like that wasn't highlighted by the author. And I also feel like the author knew what they were doing by putting so many sad, like grotesque things that do happen to real people, but almost exploiting the reader. Because if you're gonna cry and read something and feel so deeply connected to a character, well, of course you're gonna like the book. Like, of course you're gonna be like, this book like changed me, this book was powerful, this book like is amazing. But so many people are like, I felt all those things, but don't read it. And I feel like the reason people say don't read it is because, yes, maybe you connected with the characters and all of those things, but like just the execution is not something that you feel that people should like bring into their life, because it really is just like, there's no hope in this book. And no one wants to read a book where the entire story is just like no semblance of joy within it. And I don't know, I could go on and on and on about this book. And again, I know so many people love this book, and so it's a very controversial take, but I wanted to read it because I wanted to give my 2 cents. And another thing, we could go on and on. Another thing about this book, this author is writing about the queer community and is not a part of the queer community at all, and is writing, at least to my knowledge, I don't know, I have done research on this author because I'm like, let me dig into like their thought process between this book, because I really couldn't get why I rated this 2 stars and like why so many people rated it so highly. And this author is not part of the queer community and is writing a story without research from the queer community at all, which felt very weird to me. I don't think it's a bad thing as an author to write about communities that you're not a part of, but I do think that it's weird, very, very weird, to write about experiences without actually talking to the people who experience those things from that community that you're not a part of. And it gave like the vibe of like you're just exploiting a group to get like a lot of hype around a book. Like, I don't know, I just didn't like it. I didn't like it. I think the reason why I ended up rating it 2 stars is because the writing is really good. The writing will make you connect to the characters. It will make you cry. I cried multiple times reading this. I had to put it down, and there was one point where Brady actually asked me, he was like, are you okay? Like, you've been feeling off this last month. And I'm like, it's literally this book. Like, this book has like a black cloud around it. And just the vibes of this book, they're not the best. So I definitely say take this with caution. And I think the reason I picked up this book is because I felt so like drawn to it, because so many people are like 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. It's the saddest book I've ever read, but take caution when reading it, and I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. And I will say this was a very sad book, but there are other books that are much better than this that have a similar sad story. As you guys can see, I'm sharing tons of sad books. But this one is just sad. There's sadness, no hope. There's sadness with sadness upon sadness. And I feel like when you go into a sad book, you kind of expect maybe the character doesn't end up happy at the end, or their life doesn't end up perfect at the end, but you see that maybe they've grown or changed or something. And I just was like feeling as if, I don't know, it just was sad. So take that as you will. That's the first book, but I had to add this in there because this is a sad book that I've read, and I feel like you can't do a video with sad books without adding this book. But just know I did not like this book. And that is an unpopular opinion, and you don't have to tell me why you like the book, because I know why you probably did. So many people in my last video where I did like a full hour-long rating and like reading vlog of the book, they were like, oh, I like the book because it's like, I get it. I understand why you're connected with the book, because I feel like the author knew what they were doing. They knew that like the more like sad things you draw out, like of course you're gonna connect with it. And I think that's why so many of us lean towards sad books or books where characters are going through things, because one, we've went through sad things and we resonate with the characters, and two, I feel like it also gives us empathy for people around us. It makes us feel emotions and feelings that maybe we've like pent up and we just want to feel something. But that author knew what they were doing. Like they just knew. Another book that I do think is sad, it's contemporary fiction, but it does have like bits of hope in it, and it also has it's written by a Black author, and it also has romance in it. Is Someday Maybe by Ani Nwabineli. This book is a very sad book, and you will have to put it down multiple times as you're reading it. It's about, and this literally says this on the inside of the book, so I'm not spoiling anything. It's about a woman whose husband takes his own life, and literally I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about how I felt reading this book, because it is so sad. It shows how grief manifests itself into someone's life, and how the main character really just had to lean on her friends and family to like even just get her up on a daily basis to like eat and get dressed and things like that. And it shows how hard that can be. I feel like if you've never went through this type of grief in any way, or just like lost someone that you love, you will really feel so much empathy for people who do. And if you have went through something like that, you'll feel very seen in the way that you maybe have navigated grief if it wasn't in the best way. Because again, I use quotes because there is no best way to navigate grief, but it can be easy to get down on ourselves when we navigate grief in a way that isn't conducive for our daily lives, like getting up, going to work, getting dressed, like all the things. And this was very powerful, very sad. I had to pick it up and put it back down real quick, but I enjoyed that book so much. Another great book is This Used to Be Us by Renee Carlino. This is a book I almost rated 5 stars. It is about a couple who, they are going through a divorce, they have kids, and they decide that they want to have like an apartment where like they'll go, like one person will go sleep there and one person will sleep in the house that they were like married in, and they'll like flip flop, so that way the boys, their sons, don't have to like get their house completely uprooted. You see them argue. If you want a book where people argue, you will see them argue in this book. It felt so realistic, and it also felt like an emotional roller coaster from start to finish. There were lots of sad moments because you want so badly for them to like be healed or like navigate this in like a less sad way, because obviously both of them are like wanting a divorce, but it is still a sad thing. And I think that that's something that you don't read about often, is just like divorce and people going through it. And even if they feel like it's what's best for them, you don't like see how sad that can be and the grief that comes along with it in books very often. So this one was a really good read. And another great read, which is also a super sad one, and definitely go into this with caution, is Nightcrawling by Layla Motley. Now, this is a book that I do think does not have, like, it reminds me of the vibe of what I was saying with A Little Life, where it doesn't really have a, like, perfect ending. It doesn't have a ton of joy in it, but I do think the thing that this book does differently that that book does not do is this one shines a light on our justice system and shines a light on how our government and just the systems we have in place that are supposed to help people is just so broken. And so it kind of, once you read this book, and you'll know what I mean when you read it. Once you read this book, you will feel so sad for how these characters had to navigate life, because it's about a girl who is a sex worker but doesn't really want to be, but she is using that as her way to survive, and she's really struggling financially, doesn't have like a family to really fall back on. Her brother is kind of there but kind of not, and he also is doing his own thing to try to figure out how to just survive. And by the end of this book, you'll just realize that there are people who go through this and they so badly want to get out of the systems that they're in, but the systems in government that we have in place to help those people just aren't doing the job that they're supposed to. So I think that I left this book, yes, with sadness, but I left it feeling very invigorated to, like, make a change in the world, help people in my community and that sort of thing. Whereas the other book, I just left feeling sad. I left feeling sad. So I do think that there are times when there can be books where they're just sad to be sad, but I think that every author, they know what they're doing, and this author did such a great job of highlighting how these characters could have had such a, like, much better life if the systems that were in the government were in place for them and actually were able to be used in the way that they were meant to. So those are the books that I have read, but I do have a large stack of books that I haven't read yet. These are the stack of books that I haven't read yet. I'm so excited for these just because they're all so different. The first books right here, let me share the romance. No, let me share the young adult books first because I feel like those will be just like easier to get through. So I have two young adult books here, and the first one is You've Reached Sam. It literally says on the back that 17-year-old Julie Clark has her future all planned out, move out of her small town with her boyfriend Sam, attend college in the city, spend a summer in Japan, but then Sam dies and everything changes. That alone, I'm in. I'm literally in. And it says, heartbroken, Julie skips a funeral, throws out his belongings, and tries everything to forget him. And so it seems like just Julie is navigating grief in this, and it, I think, has a little bit of magical realism in it. Not 100% sure, but there's over 1 million copies sold of this book, so I had to pick it up. Also love the sprayed edges that they have in most bookstores now. I also picked up Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. If you've never read a book by her, she's an incredible Black author, which also, I don't think I told you guys, Nightcrawling is also by a Black author as well. I feel like I tried to mention the books that are by Black authors. If you're trying to read diversely, sometimes you can't tell by the cover. This one, I feel like you can, but this one is actually about a 17-year-old who's trying to make it in the music world and the music industry. She ends up falling into this web of, I don't know the word to use, but falls into the web of Corey Fields, who is an R&B artist who says that he can like help her make it big. And I think that this is allegedly supposed to be like a similar story to R. Kelly and all the atrocities that he like committed against younger girls. And this is supposed to be like just a look at Black girls and how society doesn't ever view them as the innocent, docile, the victim that they should be in situations like this. And this will be, I think, my third book by Tiffany D. Jackson, I think. So I definitely want to read this one soon. I've had it on my TBR for way too long, and I know that it's going to be a good read because their books are so good. I also have 3 romances, and the first one is A Love Letter to Whiskey. I have been meaning to pick this up for so long, I could literally scream at myself. This one is supposed to be a heart wrenching book because the characters go through so much together. I don't even know really what it's about. I just know that it is a huge bestseller. So many people have loved it, and so I feel like I would love it too. I think this has a trope in it that a lot of people hate. So if you are like really picky with tropes, just look up what that is. I feel like you'll see what it is pretty quickly. And then I also want to read Hold Me While You Wait. I also don't know what this one is about, but I do know that it's supposed to be very, very sad. I don't want to spoil anything on the back, so I don't want to say too much about it, but I have read one book by this author, and I'm pretty sure I have, and their writing, I think, was very like deep and heartfelt. And yeah, I think that this is just supposed to be a very deep story, and I love books like that. Another book, Say You Swear, has been on my TBR to read for the longest, but the only thing that makes me hesitant is because so many people have they've spoiled what happens in this book. And I know that there is, I don't want to spoil it for you guys, so I'm just going to read the back. It says, "For years I've dreamt of what college could bring, and while some things changed, there was always one constant. It didn't matter how wild I allowed my imagination to run, it always led me to the same place in the end. It led me to him. My future was clear and he was it until suddenly he wasn't. Now I'm a shell of who I was on a path too blurry to follow and I see no way out, no way up. They say first loves last forever. That's exactly what I'm afraid of." So I can't really say too much about this book without spoiling it, but I feel like I know so much about this book already because so many people have spoiled what happens just on like TikTok and stuff. So comment below if I should still read it if I already kind of know what's gonna happen, if it would still actually be an enjoyable read for me. I really don't know. That's why I haven't picked it up, because I'm like, I can't read a book that's this long. It's like, what? I don't know. Yeah, 537 pages, and so many people have just absolutely spoiled what happens in the book. I have to like I really struggle with when people spoil books. That's why, like, even if there's a trope that's like, you know, a trope that you feel like you know what's gonna happen, if it doesn't say it on the back of the book, I'm not telling you guys what happens in the book. Like, I'm just not, because I don't want to spoil a book for you, because I know that kind of ruins things for me. I also have a stack of books that are in the contemporary fiction genre, and the first book is The Nightingale by Christian Hannah. This is told, I think, in like World War II time frame. I read The Four Winds by this author, and it was a 5-star read for me, so I feel like I will really love this author's writing in this story. And her books have a lot of dialogue in it, which is so surprising because I didn't think historical fiction would really have a lot of dialogue, but I absolutely ate it up. I also want to read Take My Hand by Dolene Perkins Valdez. I'll link all these books below, but this is about it says a searing and compassionate novel about a young black nurse's shocking discovery and a burning quest for justice in post-segregation Alabama. Again, I don't want to spoil anything. I know what this book is about because so many people have talked about it, but I don't want to spoil it for you if you don't know what it's about. But it's supposed to be a very, 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 very sad book, and it's also based on true events. I want to read Beartown by Friedrich Backman. I am kind of scared of this book because there isn't a ton of dialogue in it, and you guys know how I love my dialogue when I read books. But I've heard just great things about this, and I've heard that it's very sad. It's about a hockey team, I think, that everyone cheers on in the town, and they all love so much, and then I think something big happens in the town that kind of like makes it fall apart, and everyone's not as close-knit as they used to be. I feel like I already know what's gonna happen because so many people have spoiled this story for me, but I still want to read it anyway. And then Adelaide, I actually know nothing about this book, and I want to keep it that way. Sometimes there's books that I feel like it's so viral and popular that people like just can't keep their mouth shut, so they start talking about what happens, and I'm like, wait, that didn't happen. That wasn't on the back of the book. How, like, are you telling me this? But then there's other books that I feel like don't get the same hype, which is kind of nice because I go into it without knowing much about it. This one, it says it's an unflinching, honest, and unflinching honesty and heart. This relatable debut from a fresh new voice explores grief and mental health while capturing the timeless nature of what it's like to be young and in love with your friends, with your city, and with a person who will not love you back. I mean, that's all I need to know. It just looks like a good read. I got this from my friend. I think on my birthday. And then No Reservations by Cheryl Lister was actually on my TBR for this month, and I just don't think I'm gonna get to it, but I do wanna read it. It is about a friend group, and they're in their mid-30s, and one of the main like people in the friend group ends up getting terminal cancer, which they didn't prepare for. It says nothing could have prepared them for what life would look like when 4 became 3. And it says, but Yvette was prepared. Her final gift to her girls is an all expenses paid trip to Jamaica, like they had always talked about, but kept putting off as life got in the way. So it seems like it's just going to be a very sad book, but maybe one that brings a lot of hope and joy, because friendship is so important. So those are all of the books that I want to read that are sad books. I feel like sad books are perfect for the season right now. And if you love sad books, comment one that you've read that you absolutely love below, that you think maybe I'll love or someone else will love. And we can just have like a whole list of sad books, books that made us cry, that gave us hope, that maybe didn't give us hope, but just made us really like feel feelings. Comment all of those below and we can get lots of recs from one another. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.